Hello, I'm Alantha Garrison, Energy Use Advisor at Gunnison County Electric Association. And in this presentation, you'll learn how you can reduce your demand on GCEA's new three-part rate. Your energy use under a three-part rate structure can cost you different amounts depending on how you're using your energy. It can cost you a lot to run appliances for chores if you run them at the same time when a demand component is involved. Many members will run multiple appliances at the same time to complete their chores after work or school each evening, but this can run up your power bill when a demand component is involved. The new three-part rate in 2026 will charge for the highest demand incurred during the peak period, which is from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday, over the course of the billing month, starting at $1 per kilowatt in 2026 and increasing to an estimated $7.50 per kilowatt by 2030 before adjusting for inflation. In the following slides, you'll see examples of how much power common appliances use. These examples show how much the demand charge could be to operate these appliances and other items under the three-part rate structure. You'll see that by avoiding stacking chores and shifting the use of these items to off-peak times, you can save money on demand charges. The highest demand shown in the following slides is what you could be charged for demand on the new rate beginning in 2026. So the graph here shows what might happen if you came home from work or school, started the electric oven to cook dinner, and decided to do some vacuuming while the oven was running. After dinner, you might decide to run the dishwasher, and while the dishwasher is running, maybe you decide to start the washer to run a load of laundry. Then you have the clothes washer and the clothes dryer running while you start another load. And then later that evening, you decide to take a shower, so the electric water heater turns on. And then much later, you have your electric vehicle start charging. This slide here shows some household power spikes during chores after work and how much the demand charge could be per kilowatt in 2026. Starting at $1 per kilowatt, you can see that there's quite a range of costs involved, anywhere from about 25 cents for a base load, which is all kind of your minimum amount of energy being used, 0.25 kilowatts, all the way up to 8 kilowatts if you have the clothes washer and the clothes dryer running at the same time. If that occurs during the peak period, that can cost you $8. This chart here highlights the peak period from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And in this scenario, the highest demand during the peak period of 8 kilowatts when the clothes washer and clothes dryer were running at the same time would cost you $8 for $1 per kilowatt in 2026. When we go up to 2030 and the cost per kilowatt goes up to the estimated $7.50 per kilowatt, you can see that the base load charge is quite low still at $1.88 for 0.25 kilowatts. But if you decided to run the washer and the dryer at the same time and you hit 8 kilowatts, that could cost you $60. So that's something you would like to avoid doing so you can keep your costs low. If you made some changes to the way you used your energy and decided to use a crock pot instead of your oven, you'd be using about 325 watts while the crock pot is running, and then later decided to run the dishwasher and then the clothes washer, but you decided to wait until after the peak period is over to run the clothes dryer and do your EV charging. So you can see how in this graph, the demand is quite a bit lower than in the previous graph. So you can see that during the peak period, you have a much lower charge of 0.35 kilowatts during the peak period when the crock pot runs using an estimated 325 to 350 watts while it runs. And then the highest demand incurred during the peak period is when the dishwasher is running, about 1.7 kilowatts. So if you wait until later, you can see the much higher demand charges are occurring later outside of the peak period, but you would not be charged for this demand. So starting in 2026 at 1.7 kilowatts, your cost for the demand would be $1.70. And so you can see in this chart here, that just outlines this information the same way. And these are common wattages again, and how much it would cost you in 2026 to run these appliances. And then as we get into 2030, again, with the estimated charge of $7.50 per kilowatt, you can see that these charges go up quite a bit. So if you ran them separately, you can see that just by having the clothes washer run separately, the cost instead of $60 for demand for running a clothes washer and clothes dryer is reduced to $49.50. However, you would still probably decide to run your clothes dryer at a later date or a later time outside of the peak period so you can avoid this charge. So how can you reduce your demand and keep your costs down? Well, you'd want to become familiar with how much energy your items use when they run. So keep an inventory of the items that are using energy, and especially those with the highest power draws. Avoid stacking the use of many appliances and other items like electronics. Use items that use less energy and have a lower power draw during the peak times. And then wait until off-peak hours to complete your chores, and especially those that require higher power like your clothes dryers, electric ovens, and EV charging stations. You can also use timers to delay the start times of appliances such as the dishwasher, an EV charger, or a water heater. Now, if you're using a timer to control your water heater's usage during the peak period, you'll want to know how much hot water you use during the peak period to ensure that you don't run out of hot water. So how do you know how much energy your items use? So most appliances, electronics, heating systems, etc., have a data plate that shows how much energy they use while they're in operation. So you'll have to find that data plate on your appliances or other items. You typically can find them on items like your clothes washer and dryer around the rim. On an electric oven, you'll find that most likely in the bottom drawer of the oven. And on electronics, you can find them on the back or the bottom of those items. Some items will only show you the volts and amps that they use, and you can find the wattage by multiplying volts times amps. So you can see that in this example on this slide for a clothes washer, based on the figures, it's running at 10 amps and 120 volts. This uses 1200 watts. When you divide the 1200 watts by 1000, you can come up with your kilowatts that it uses when it runs. And of course, that's how we will be billing for the demand rate, the demand component. So it's 1.2 kilowatts, which means that in 2026, that would cost you $1.20 if this was the highest demand that you incurred during the peak period over the course of the billing month. So some common considerations that you might need to keep in mind if you're heating with electricity is that you might not be able to keep your demand costs down when your heating system is using electricity to generate heat. Items like baseboard heaters, electric furnaces, and electric boilers can all have a high power draw that leads to a high demand and high demand charges. Some homes can have over 20 kilowatts of electric heat. An electric furnace or boiler can draw over 25 kilowatts when running. So it may be a cost that you have to consider will be part of your electric bill moving forward, because it might be difficult to avoid the use of your heating system during the peak hours. So you'll want to be aware that you will probably have higher demand charges. Now, if you're heating with a gas heating system or you have gas appliances, like natural gas or propane for your water heating, home heating, or cooking food, so your oven and your stovetop, or clothes drying, your demand will be much lower, as gas appliances that use natural gas or propane to generate heat do not require as much electricity. So there will still be a small electrical draw to distribute or circulate the heat to ignite the pilot light on a gas heating system, but it's much lower than when you use an electric heating system or an electric appliance. So cooking during peak hours with gas appliances will also keep demand lower, as pilot light to ignite the burners uses electricity, but much less energy than when an electric appliance is running. So could a different rate benefit you? And the answer is yes. You may have a cost benefit by switching to a different rate, in particular GCEA's time of use or TOU rate. The TOU rate charges different amounts for energy in kilowatt hours, which is energy used over time, not the highest power draw during the billing month, with a higher cost per kilowatt hour during the peak period and a lower cost the rest of the time, which is considered the off-peak period. Depending on your usage during the peak period, And if you can keep this usage to 25% or less compared to the total usage over the billing period, you most likely will have cost savings if you're a residential member, but there are some commercial accounts that mainly operate during off-peak hours that will also have cost savings on a time of use rate. Any member that elects to move to a TOU rate must stay on the rate for 12 months according to GCEA policy, and you must contact GCEA to get off the rate if you no longer decide to be on it after the 12-month period. A net metered and TOU rate combination, which we call TGen, may be beneficial to some members. However, if your renewable energy system went online before 2026 and you could opt into the legacy rate, but instead you opted into a TGen rate, if you decide you no longer want to be on the TGen rate after a 12-month period, you cannot opt into the legacy net metered two-part rate when you get off the TGen rate. So please contact me for a rate analysis to see if a TOU or a TGen rate will benefit you, because each situation is different. The TOU rate will also charge a lower cost per kilowatt during the peak period. So it will start at 50 cents per kilowatt compared to $1 per kilowatt for all the other rates, such as the general service rate and new net metered accounts that are set up after January 1st, 2026. The cost per kilowatt is estimated to rise by half the amount compared to the other rates. So by 2030, the estimated cost per kilowatt on the TOU rate would be $3.75 before adjusting for inflation. If you have any questions about the information in this presentation, please feel free to contact me. Again, I'm Alantha Garrison, the Energy Use Advisor at Gunnison County Electric Association. And you can reach me at agarrison@gcea.coop or 970-641-3520. Thank you.